Alright, so let's talk about that indie showcase just a little bit. Because originally what I'd wanted to do was make a video about the Nintendo Direct from last week, but ultimately, after a lot of people were speculating whether there would even be a Nintendo Direct for July, when it finally did arrive, it was a little bit underwhelming. Now don't get me wrong, there were certainly some bright spots, like Persona 3 Reload, which I was hoping would be announced, and if you're an RPG fan, there was no shortage of new experiences shown off to get excited about, not the least of which is a new entry in the Octopath Traveler series with Octopath Traveler 0, which does look like it's going to be pretty slick to its credit. But on the whole, it really didn't seem like it broke a lot of new ground, and I can understand why a lot of people came away from that Direct not being super excited necessarily. However, this past week, Nintendo did stream an Indie World Showcase that showed off a fair amount of new indie titles that are coming to the system between later this year and 2026. So that's what today's video is all about, is I just want to rehash some of the highlights that were shown off there, and wrap this up with a few of my personal top picks from what was shown, just in case you wanted a more condensed version of what we saw on Thursday. And I gotta say, they came out pretty strong right out of the gate by showcasing a montage of Mina the Hollower from the creators of Shovel Knight with a free demo that is available right now. And as expected, it continues to show off a loving homage to the 8-bit era, and considering what a stellar experience Shovel Knight was, I've no doubt this will end up being a day one purchase for me, and I'll certainly be jumping on that demo sometime soon. Next up, we got a quick look at a game that at first I thought was going to be a pretty by-the-numbers action game, until they quickly showed a shot of the map and immediately became clear that this was going to be a Metroidvania, and that would be Well Dweller. All I can really tell about it from what we've seen is that you are tasked with saving bird kind, and while the visual style kind of reminded me of Braid, some of the other mechanics on display like dodging, parrying, and of course a bonfire definitely shows how they're taking some Souls-like elements and crafting what I'm sure will be a more challenging experience than what we've seen so far. Next up, we were given a look at Neverway, which is a nightmarish, I would say, Cthulhian flavored take on the Stardew Valley slice of life simulator genre. And this one is actually co-created by one of the artists from Celeste, but the thing that really caught my eye, or I guess I should say caught my ear, is that it also features Disasterpeace doing the soundtrack, which is especially notable because he also did the soundtrack for Fez, but for me personally, knowing that he also did the soundtrack for It Follows, which is one of my favorite horror movies, definitely inspires a lot of confidence in somebody who is a fan of the horror genre and, well, cozier fare like Stardew Valley. And in this game, you'll be playing as Fiona, a girl who quits her job and decides to move to a farm, but that's about where the Stardew Valley elements end, because in addition to farm life, you'll also become the immortal herald of a dead deity. And while it certainly has that crunchy pixel aesthetic, it certainly takes on a much darker tone, and visually I'm just loving everything that I see here. From a gameplay perspective, it looks like it's still going to have the same kind of activities you would expect in a game like this, things like harvesting resources and finding upgrades, and building relationships with a range of colorful characters, but it also looks like it will feature deeper combat than you get from a lot of those types of games, probably closer to Cult of the Lamb than say Rune Factory, although certainly still steeped in that Stardew Valley aesthetic, albeit much darker. Suffice it to say, I'm definitely looking forward to this one, and the only thing that pains me about it is it looks like it's not coming until 2026, and I would love to dive into this October, but hey, good things come to those who wait, right? But this next title they showed off is coming out in just a couple of weeks on August 21st, and that would be Herdling. And I have to say, this looks like a pretty chill experience from what I've seen so far. Certainly one that has some adventure, because you are guiding mysterious creatures into the mountains, but based on all of the gorgeous environments that have been showcased so far, I think this is going to be a really great game to just kind of kick back with between larger, beefier affairs. Beyond finding more beasts to add to your herd, you'll also find dangers, obstacles, and apparently some puzzles you have to solve as you ultimately guide these mystical creatures towards the summit. It definitely seems like a unique premise, and I was trying to think of other games where you have to herd creatures or at least interact with a group of creatures, and the only ones I could really think of were maybe Pikmin, which is a series I don't have a lot of familiarity with, or the often forgotten and ironically probably overlooked game Overlord from the 360 era. And for an indie game, it actually looks grander in scope than a lot of the games you would consider to be indie fare, I guess. And while I'm not sure if this one will be a day one purchase for me, it's certainly one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on when it releases here in a couple of weeks. And next they showed a game that actually launched on that day with Is This Seat Taken, which is a cute take on management games where you'll basically be managing a bunch of little characters to see how they will respond to the arrangement that you choose in various settings. Maybe that's a waiting room, maybe it's a bus, maybe it's a theater, and I definitely appreciate the simple art style they have on display here, although for me a game like this would probably be one, ironically, I would just play in short bursts probably while I was in a waiting room. But I think the more interesting appeal of Is This Seat Taken specifically being on the Switch 2 is I'm curious if it will take advantage of the Joy-Con mouse mode, because this seems like exactly the type of game that would be well suited to that. Again, for me personally, I'll probably end up passing on this one for now, although if I ever do find it on sale, I would probably go ahead and grab it just to see how well it does with the Joy-Con mouse control, assuming that's implemented, which I can't imagine they wouldn't based on the mechanics that have already been shown. Next up, we got a quick look at a free update that's on the way for Little Kitty Big City called the Purrfect update, which appears to add customization options and also increased photo mode options. Which, while I do appreciate that it's a free update, it did seem like kind of an odd thing to sort of throw in between a bunch of other game announcements. But nonetheless, I've already played and covered Little Kitty Big City on the Steam Deck from I think last year, and it definitely is a fun time. So if you also enjoyed Little Kitty Big City, I guess that's something nice to look forward to. And even though it wasn't one of the more exciting announcements from the Direct, I still appreciate that the game apparently is doing well enough to warrant some free content, and that's a pretty cool move from the developers. After that, we got to look at Content Warning, which is a co-op survival horror game, which I actually already have in my Steam library, and even though I haven't played it yet, it definitely gives me the same kind of vibe as I got from Repo. And while it's cool enough to have a game that's centered on co-op spooky adventures, I really love that it also has an angle where you're a content creator and uploading videos to SpookTube. And personally, I'll probably check this out first on Steam since I already own a copy of it. It does make me happy to see that it's coming to the Switch, but more so on the Switch 2, considering the Switch 2 has a larger focus on co-op gaming, but with the inclusion of game chat. Where online multiplayer experiences were a little bit more lackluster to me in the Switch 1 era, in the Switch 2 era, given that it has a built-in microphone and better support for jumping into a chat with your friends, I think games like this become infinitely more viable, and I hope we see more experiences like this begin to manifest on the platform. Next up, we were treated to a look at a new action roguelike called Ball Pit that's heavily inspired by games like Vampire Survivors or Loop Hero. And considering it features a low poly pixel art style, it definitely grabbed my attention. And as somebody who grew up playing Capcom's Gunsmoke back in the day, it definitely gave me that same kind of vibe. And considering one of my favorite early experiences on the Steam Deck was in fact Vampire Survivors, this is probably one that I'll end up taking the leap on. Next up, we got a quick look at Ultimate Sheep Raccoon, which I think is a sequel or at least a spiritual successor to Ultimate Chicken Horse, which is a bike racing party game of sorts, and this will probably be a tremendous couch co-op game to play with your friends, and an experience that's just well suited to the Switch period given its portable nature, and the kind of quick pick up and play game that you'd likely enjoy with a few friends if you're stuck waiting for your food at a restaurant or something like that. I never really played the original Ultimate Chicken Horse. I will tell you that thematically it gives me the same vibes as something like a Duck Game maybe. So yeah, not my favorite one on this list, but I'm sure a lot of people enjoy that game, and I'm sure they'll be thrilled to get even more of that kind of action. And finally, they rounded out the presentation with Glaciered, which is a nature-inspired JRPG. Set 65 million years in the future, the Earth is entirely encased by Everwinter. You'll play as an advanced avian species that's descended from dinosaurs to protect the Everwinter oceans underneath. I think it's definitely taking some cues from Abzu or Subnautica, and from what they've shown of the combat so far, where you're swimming through these scenic vistas and doing battles with sea beasts from a range or up close and personal, this is definitely shaping up to be a unique experience. And thankfully, unlike some of the other titles on this list, it is going to be available this holiday season, so we shouldn't have to wait too long for this one. And while I didn't see a demo for this available on the Switch yet, there is a demo available for this on Steam if you want to check it out there, and get a taste of what to expect before it launches again later this year. And beyond the deeper dive they did on the titles that I've shown so far, they also did show a quick montage of some other games that are coming out soon. And I do really like that Nintendo continues to put indie developers front and center to make sure they're a core part of the Nintendo ecosystem moving forward. Because as much as I like seeing the heavy hitters that are coming out from larger publishers, I also really like to see all the unique things that are being done by indie developers in the space, since they're inherently able to take more risks and try more interesting things than what we typically get from larger creators who tend to have a lot more to lose and a lot more stakeholders that are looking for them to stick with what works more often than they're willing to indulge innovation. So yeah, even though Nintendo showed off a range of experiences with a moderately deep dive into some of the biggest ones that are coming up, I think I'd have to say Neverway is my top pick from the Indie World Showcase. I'm not sure if it's going to break any exceptionally new ground, but honestly, considering I'm a huge sucker for horror, pick up and play experiences, and blending the cozy and charming with more unsettling themes definitely makes that one a win for me. Not to mention it is August right now and we are getting ever closer to Halloween, which is my favorite time of the year, so yeah, if I could only pick one from this list, that would probably be my top pick, but hey, what about you? Are there any particular games that spoke to you from the showcase? If so, I would love to hear about them in the comments below. As for what's coming up on the channel, I still have a pair of videos comparing and contrasting the Switch 2 and the Steam Deck, so stay tuned for that. As always, thank you so much for your time and watching videos here on the channel. I really appreciate it. Have an amazing day, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.